Okay, so I just discussed what a right to liberty includes or involves, at least on the surface, for libertarians who prize the right to liberty. I want to continue with Sandel's argument here and look at what a libertarian kind of ideal society would look like in what's known as a minimal state. Now, these ideas stem largely from another Harvard professor. His name is Robert Nozick, and it's his book, Anarchy, State, Utopia from 1974, which gives the kind of theoretical underpinnings to libertarian philosophy and political theory. Now, what would a minimal state in the libertarian sense involve if it's unjust for other people, including government or governmental agencies, to infringe upon a person's right to liberty? Well, it actually involves something very minimal. It doesn't involve nothing. Now, so Nozick, in a sense, is not an anarchist. Rather, he thinks that a minimal state is necessary in order to uphold the theory of justice. So what does it look like? Well, there would have to be agencies to enforce contracts. There would have to be the protection of private property. And we might need agencies in order to keep the peace, generally. And so it seems, and that's it. It seems as though in the libertarian conception, we'll need something like the police or the military in order to keep the peace. And we'll need a judiciary or a court system in order to enforce contracts and to protect private property. But there is no particular need for a legislature or for an executive branch or for other agencies on a libertarian conception of a society. And so one of the things that Sandel notes at this point is he notes all the kinds of things that perhaps we take for granted in a society like our own that would not be included on the libertarian conception. So, for example, things like Social Security or Medicaid or Medicare or fire protection or the FDA, Food and Drug Administrations, and plenty of others. Also, the very concept of the minimum wage. None of these would play a role in a libertarian society. And so I want to do something particularly with this one, since we started off with this notion of economic inequality. I want you to watch another video. It's a video that is a part of a congressional hearing. And the particular speaker is an independent senator from Vermont. His name is Bernie Sanders. The reason I want you to watch this video, a couple of reasons. First, he's independent, so he's neither easily Democrat or Republican. And this is one of the things that Sandel emphasizes with libertarianism. It doesn't seem to follow very easily on either conservative or liberal principles. Why not on conservative principles? Well, even though conservatives tend to be pro-free market, to think that the market should allocate and distribute different kinds of goods. It's also the case, as perhaps we saw with the abortion debate, that conservatives tend to be just that, traditional or conservative, with respect to certain kinds of social issues, like abortion or like same-sex marriage, and so on. That doesn't line up very well with a libertarian philosophy, because libertarians would claim that any kind of restriction upon same-sex marriage or a woman choosing to have an abortion would be an infringement upon that person's right to liberty, to choose how it is that he or she sees fit to live his or her life. It also libertarianism does not seem to line up very well with liberals who are of the Democratic bent. Why? Less so on the social some of the social issues, more with concerns about the free market and the kind of income inequality that I've already talked about in the first video. And so I want you to go pause this video for a minute and watch this other video on the minimum wage, in which this independent senator from Vermont, who is a left-leaning individual, but neither obviously Democrat or Republican, is talking about the nature of the minimum wage, and in particular, near the end of the video, he gets two people, a conservative who's another senator, and a person who's at the Heritage Foundation, to claim that they do not believe in the concept of the minimum wage. And insofar as they don't believe in the minimum wage, the reason I want you to look at this is because that seems to be a kind of libertarian principle that they are holding, at least in that instance. So take a look at that and then come on back. Okay, so I hope you had a chance to watch that video. And again, the point of that is to show that a libertarian philosophy seems to be at least present in some members of our current society and in some thinking about how it is that we should arrange our society. I want to go further. So we have some idea of what a minimalist state would entail, how it would cut out basically all of these kinds of social programs. And I want to suggest more about this libertarian philosophy with the help of Sandel. So let's call this two constraints and three problems. The problems are not yet the objections that Sandel considers at the end. Robert Nozick offers two kinds of constraints on this nature of justice involving a libertarian philosophy. Near the middle of the chapter, Sandel identifies these. First, well, two of them, right? So first involves the initial holdings. That people enjoy. So the question that Nozick raises is, are the initial holdings that people have they been gained in a just way? Have people gained their initial holdings, their property, in other words, in a just way without abusing other people's resources or taking away their rights or liberty? If so, then those holdings, no matter what they are, whether it's Bill Gates with billions of dollars or whether it's someone else who has very little, if nothing at all, if those initial holdings have been gotten or received in a just way without abusing the resources of others, then it's the case that those initial holdings are just. And so, Sandel does raise a question, in fact Nozick raises it himself. Is it always easy to ascertain, to determine whether initial holdings that people have been gotten in just ways? Or have they violated other people's rights? Have they violated other people's rights to liberty in particular in gaining those holdings? Well, if they have, again, it's a problem. It would be unjust. And so in that sense, if there were holdings that had been gained in ill-gotten ways, there could be grounds for redress, or even, say, for reparation. But it's important to realize that the reason here has nothing to do with a redistribution which would promote welfare or make people better off. It's only a redress or a reparation in virtue of having stolen property or rights or resources from someone else. And so it's just giving back what was initially stolen in one form or another. That would be the grounds for giving back on ill-gotten initial holdings. But there is a concern here, and maybe this is one you would like to take up. Can we determine, can we ascertain which holdings are just and which are not? Because it seems as though there are going to be cases in which it's very difficult to figure that out. And Sandel points to two, and I'll let you take this up if you want to. In the case of slavery, maybe in other parts of the world, but also in the United States, does it seem as though people are still, perhaps, living their lives with the holdings that they have, the property that they have, which only has its value in virtue of enslaving other people, and thereby depriving them of their resources and their rights to their own liberty. That's one. Sandel also brings up the case of depriving Native Americans of the land that they were initially on. Okay, now that's one constraint on justice for Nozick. The other constraint is similar to this. It's not about initial holdings, but have people gained the property that they have in virtue of voluntary exchange in a free market, or by virtue of a gift? Again, if the answer is yes, then whatever holdings they happen to have, whatever property they happen to have is just. If not, if somebody was coerced in a particular kind of way, or obviously if property was stolen, then this is unjust. And so Nozick does have certain kinds of constraints upon the justice that's involved, but none of it, he claims, would allow a governmental agency to, say, redistribute property or wealth, unless one of those was violated. And here's the thing. Nozick suggests that if we were to think that, if we were to think that redistribution of property or wealth were somehow just or permissible, then we start to run into three problems. It's the problems that are told in virtue of the Will Chamberlain, or in Sandel's case, the Michael Jordan story. One problem is that if we were to think this, it would seem to involve a continuous intervention. We would have to intervene all the time into people's voluntary exchanges. And that seems as though it's too overturning those voluntary exchanges, and thereby overturning the voluntary choices that people make, and again, thereby violating their liberty. And it's the third criticism that is basically a result of these other two, that in virtue of thinking that one has a right, that a governmental agency or society at large has a right to redistribute wealth or property, what you would be doing, Nozick says, is you'd be taking earnings from someone who's gained their property in a just way with these two constraints against that person's will. And if you're taking their earnings, their property, or their wealth against their will, again, you are violating their liberty to do with their property as they see fit. And what that means, on Nozick's view, is that this is akin to forced labor or even slavery. Because what you've done now is stake a claim in somebody else's property, in somebody else's own person even. And suggesting that forced labor or slavery is okay is just to say that you are violating, this is Nozick's view, a right to self-ownership. And so in the next video, I want to talk a little bit about what this self-ownership amounts to. I want to discuss, or at least highlight, a couple of the objections that Sandel raises by the end of the piece. And then I might want to take this in one further direction.